Now, the first exercise that we're going to go over as part of this series is squats. Now, why would we start with squats? The reason for that is it does not matter who you are, how old you are, or what your physical ability level is, you need to be able to squat. Because squatting, at the end of the day, is how we sit. So whether you're talking about sitting in a chair at work, getting up and down from the couch, or going to the bathroom, everybody needs to know how to squat and to squat appropriately. Otherwise, every time you go through the motion of sitting throughout the course of your day, you run the risk of hurting yourself, specifically your lower back, because the amount of energy that's needed to control that movement is pretty enormous whenever you break it down. So when it comes to squats, again, there's no perfect way to do this. It just depends what your focus is and what your end goal might be. If you're trying to lift for, Olympic style squatting, that's going to be very, very different than somebody just looking for general health and wellness. So I'm going to break it down from all aspects so that you know from a pure beginner standpoint all the way through advanced movement what might be best for you. So if you have no idea how to squat, the first thing that I would recommend is just understanding the basic form. Now, for that, a good starting point is to focus a mid spot in the middle of your chest, basically between your belly button and right below your breast line. Put your finger there, and then look down at your feet. And everything should be making a slight V, where your knees are a little bit wider than your hips, and your feet are a little bit wider than your knees. And you want to turn your feet out slightly just so it takes some of the pressure off the tendons and ligaments in your knees and your hips. Now, as you start to get set up, if it doesn't feel right, don't hesitate to play around. You might need to bring your feet a little closer together. You might need to go a little wider apart. A lot of this is just experimenting until you find how your body wants to move most naturally. But I'm going to start in a position where my feet are a little wider than my knees a little wider than my hips. Now, you want to keep your arms elevated, ideally keeping your elbows up at your shoulder line, because the weight of your arms will act as a counterbalance. As you sit backwards, this will help keep you from tipping too far. When you have your arms down, there's not really a lot to help offset that weight and the pull. So try to keep your arms up, keep them in front of you, and at the very beginning, I'd recommend have a seat right behind you. It could be a chair, it could be a stack of cinder blocks, whatever you might have at your access. But find something that is pretty much at a normal seat level, and then as you go to squat, you're just waiting until you touch. And then at that point, push back through. Now, the most important thing here is to make sure that you're driving through your heels all the way. So as you're descending, think of it as if you're trying to lift your toes off the ground, and you're balancing your weight on your heels while letting your butt drift backwards. And then once you hit that point, you're squeezing your glutes and using your glutes to push your way up. A lot of times people get very quad dominant on squats. If that's what you're aiming for, that's okay. But what you should be doing is controlling the descent and the explosive force coming up all through your glute muscles, because they're the largest muscles in your body, and they're what you're going to need to rely on as you get older, and really when your stability and your balance starts to go. So a good starting point is find a seat, just focus on the form, and just do a couple practice reps, and make sure it feels normal, that you can sit and you don't feel like you're tipping forward or that you're going to go backwards. Once you feel okay there, just take a step away and see how low you can go in a controlled movement, ideally aiming for parallel with the ground so that your thighs are on a flat line with the surface that you're exercising on. Now, a lot of times people feel like they're going to tip forward and that their knees are going to come over their toes. If you're training for a sport, that might be okay, specifically basketball. Basketball players a lot of times are taught to squat so that their knees come forward, because when they play defense, their bodies are always in that position. But if you're doing this just for general fitness, it's really, really important to make sure that you keep your shoulders pulled back, you let your glutes and your hips do the work, is you descend and then drive through your heels as you go to stand up. Maintaining good form and maintaining that V. Now, if you have a problem with your heels lifting, or you feel like you're just going up onto the balls of your feet as you try to push out, there's a pretty easy correction to that. And all you need is about a ½ inch surface that's balanced on both sides that you can stand on. So here, I just grabbed a couple of rocks, and you just put those underneath your heels to get your heels slightly elevated so that it's harder for you to cheat. And then as you go down, it should feel easier to control because now your heels are elevated, your calves are engaged, your quads are getting shut off a little bit because of the angle. And as you hit that full descent, you should be able to feel your glutes contract so that you can drive all the way back up. Now, once you feel comfortable with the basics of this movement, you can start to play around a little bit with the different forms that you could choose from. So if you are trying to focus a little bit more on your quads, an easy way to target them is to set your feet completely parallel so that your feet, knees, and hips are all in the same line, and then put your arms in the same position. But as you descend, it's going to be a lot harder to maintain your stability and balance because that line that you're bracing on is much narrower. So as you drop, you're going to feel your quads engage quite a bit more just to control that tip or lean. And that's going to give you a lot more impact directly through your quads. So if that's a goal, that's an easy modification. Now, if you're looking for increased flexibility or you really want to target your glutes and your hip flexors, you can take a wider stance. These are known more as like sumo squats. There's a bunch of different names out there, but the intent is that you take a wide stance and you're dropping straight down. Simmer down the jokes, Mike. Now from this stance, you're going to feel a lot more pressure on the inside of your groin and especially on the upper part of your knee where the patella comes over your kneecap. That's just because this angle is putting a lot more strain and stress on all the muscles and tendons and ligaments from your hips down. So this is probably not something to do at the beginning, but to work up to little by little. Some of you out there may be familiar with the term full squat, half squat, and quarter squat. Now the real difference with these falls into the focus and ability level of the individual that's trying to do them. So a lot of times full squats you'll see more often in Olympic lifting facilities, CrossFit facilities, or areas where people are really trying to push their overall strength and flexibility. So a full squat is quite literally how it sounds. You're going through the full range of motion with the goal being your hamstring sitting on your calf muscle and basically your butt sitting right on your heel line. And then you're still driving through with your heels on the way up, but it's a full range of motion all the way down and then all the way back through until you're upright. Now this tends to be more on the advanced side, so I wouldn't really recommend doing it if you're new to exercise or you haven't been exercising in quite some time, because you could feel a noticeable strain on your knees, specifically your patella, which is the tendon that goes over your kneecap. So a modification is what we've already been doing, is half squats. Now with half squats, you're going all the way until essentially your thigh is parallel with the surface that you're exercising on. So whether that's outside in the grass or inside in a gym, you're only going until your thighs are parallel with the ground. And as soon as you're there, you stabilize, hold briefly, and then again, drive through your heels on the way up. Now, a quarter squat is where you would want to use your seat. So you're only going a quarter of the way down. Form's all the same, foot placement, knee, hip placement, but the quarter squat is what we started with. So you're only dropping a quarter of the way to the ground and then going back to a starting position. So for review, full squat, more advanced, half squat, typically more common for people that are exercising quite a bit. Quarter squats, great for a beginner, or if you've got any joint issues with your hips, your knees, your ankles, or with your lower back, that's going to be your best starting point. Another way that you can modify this exercise is simply the tempo you take while you do it. So there's something called speed squats, which again are exactly how they sound, in that you're just trying to do this exercise as quickly as you safely can while controlling your form and your momentum. So with speed squats, it's very important that you use your arms to counterbalance you as you're descending and standing up, because you're dropping at a faster pace and you're trying to keep that straight line form on the descent so that you can drive through your heels, balance the load between your glutes and your quads, and not tip forward or lean back. So with speed squats, arms go back when you stand, come forward as you drop, and the pattern should be balanced as you go through the entire motion. That's not something I would recommend for anybody at the beginning or even really intermediate stage of exercise. But once you start to get comfortable with this movement and you're looking to take the intensity up, specifically if you're getting involved with HIIT training or high intensity interval training, speed squats tend to be a really good way to get your heart rate up, to get your muscles exhausted pretty quick, and it is certainly more on the advanced side. Now the last concept that we're going to go over is weighted squats. Now this has a lot of different varieties, from what you might see in the gym typically with somebody that has a barbell loaded up on their back or front loaded where they're holding it right on the front of their shoulder line, all the way through to the lighter approach, which you can just use, whatever random weight you can find, dumbbells, kettlebells, medicine balls, etc. So the difference between the two is front-loaded weighted squats tend to be easier to control, easier to take your time with, and kind of navigate through, how your body might respond to it, because the weight is centered and in front of you. So it doesn't really matter what you hold. The idea is that this weight acts as a counterbalance to help you as you're dropping so that your balance doesn't try to pull you backwards. So if you're going to do a front-loaded weighted squat, the important thing is to keep the weight above your shoulder line and try not to let your elbows flare out. You really want to keep them tucked in with the line of your chest, so ideally your arms will be parallel, and keep that weight as high as you can so that as you descend, you're really having to brace the load in your legs and your glutes, and it's helping you control that momentum and balance as you stand back through. So there's nothing complicated here. It's just a slow, controlled movement, maintaining good form, and using the weight to help. When you do weighted squats and the weight is on your back, everything gets a little bit more complicated because that weight is now trying to pull you in reverse. So if you're going to do this, and especially if you've never done it, I'd recommend getting somebody to spot you, get somebody in person to watch you, make sure that your form's okay, and if you need, be there in the event that something goes wrong. It's not that it has to be overly dangerous, but there is certainly a lot more risk involved as soon as you have a heavy weight and it's laying literally on your spine. So in review, we've gone over the fundamentals of squats as far as how to use a seat, how to take your time building up your form and your joint stability. We've gone over using a platform for underneath your heels to assist with form and proper movement development. We've gone over sumo squats and narrow squats as far as what your focus might be. We went over full, half, and quarter. Then we progressed and went over speed squats. And now as a recap, went over weighted squats with front-loaded and reverse-loaded options. Hopefully that gives you a little bit of insight as far as how to do this movement, what the different options are, and what may be the best choice for you. Now, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to list them in the comments. Please subscribe so that you can keep an eye out for more videos that are yet to come. And by all means, don't hesitate to let us know what you're interested in as far as exercises you would like to see us review in the future. But thanks for watching. Hope this helps. And by all means, please take care and stay healthy. Thanks, everyone. Bye.